Welcome to Horror Stories Fanatics. If you enjoy this type of content, then subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss out on any of our latest and greatest uploads. Albert Fish was known as Frank Howard. He responded to an ad looking for work placed in the newspaper by Edward Budd. Edward Budd was an 18-year-old boy determined to make something of himself. Frank Howard arrived at Budd's doorstep with a job offer. He stated that he would like to have Budd come work with him at his farm, telling the story of his 6 children and how his wife had left them. Edward was looking forward to having a job and providing for his family, and Howard even offered a job to Bud's friend Willie. Howard planned to come pick them up a few days later to take them back to his farm to begin work. When Howard didn't show, he provided a handwritten note explaining that he would be in touch in a few days. He came over for a visit the following morning, and the family invited him to stay for lunch. During his visit, Howard spotted Bud's younger sister, Gracie, explaining that he had to attend to a birthday party before he could take the boys to the farm. He asked if Gracie would like to join him. With his gracious attitude and friendly nature, the Budds gave Gracie permission to attend the party. That evening, Howard did not return, and Gracie vanished. The family reported her disappearance to the local police, and an investigation began. No leads were discovered, partially because Frank Howard didn't exist. The Budd family received a letter with a description of the mutilation and murder of little Gracie. The note matched the handwriting from the original note sent to them earlier. During the time of the investigation, and before the letter was received, another child had vanished. Billy Gaffney, a 4-year-old boy playing with his neighbor, who was also named Billy, disappeared, and the 3-year-old Billy stated that the boogeyman had taken Billy Gaffney. The police didn't take the statement to heart and instead ignored it. Shortly after the disappearance of Billy Gaffney, another little boy also disappeared. 8-year-old Francis McDonald was playing on the porch with his mother when a gray-haired, frail old man walked down the street muttering to himself. The mother noticed his awkward demeanor but did not report anything. Later that day, while Francis was playing at the park, his friends noticed that he walked into the woods with an elderly, gray-haired man. When his family noticed that he was missing, they organized a search. Francis was found under some branches in the woods, badly beaten and strangled with his suspenders. The manhunt for the gray man began, but despite many efforts, he vanished. The letter that was received by the Budd family was investigated and was found to contain an emblem of the New York Private Chauffeurs Benevolent Association, or the NYPCBA. All of the members were required to obtain a handwriting test for comparison to the letters from Howard. A janitor came forward to admit that he had taken some sheets of paper and left them in his old rooming house. The landlady was able to confirm that an old man matching the description had lived there for 2 months and had only checked out a few days earlier. The former tenant was identified as Albert H. Fish. The landlady also mentioned that he wanted her to hold a letter that would be arriving from his son. Detectives intercepted the letter at the post office and were contacted by the landlady that he would be coming to get his letter. The lead detective was able to capture Mr. Fish. Many confessions and testimonies were heard by law enforcement and psychiatrists. Mr. Fish described how he wanted to lure Edward Budd and his friend Willie to his farm to kill them. However, once he laid eyes on Gracie, he changed his mind and desperately wanted to kill her. He took Gracie to the train station and purchased a one-way ticket for her. After the ride to the countryside, he took her into a house. While at the house, he told Gracie to wait outside and she picked flowers. He went to the 2nd floor of the house and removed all of his clothes. When he called for Gracie to come upstairs, she was frightened by him and called out for her mother. Mr. Fish choked her to death. Following her death, he decapitated her and cut up her body. He took parts with him when he left, wrapped in newspaper. Police were able to locate the remains of Gracie based on his confession. Albert Fish had many run-ins with police in his lifetime. However, each time the charges were dismissed, he discussed the details of the murder of Billy Gaffney, describing how he tied him up and beat him. He even admitted to drinking his blood and making a stew out of his body parts. His attitude was not like those of people with psychosis. He was calm and reserved, which was out of the ordinary. He confessed that he wanted to inflict pain and have pain inflicted on him. He taunted and preyed on children, mostly boys. He also had a compulsion to write and send obscene letters. An X-ray determined that he placed needles into the region between his anus and scrotum, and at least 29 needles were discovered. In trial, the defense argued that he was legally insane. They used many descriptions and testimonies to prove to the jury that he was mentally ill. However, the jury didn't believe this. He was considered to be a psychopathic personality without a psychosis, and he was found guilty after 10 days of trial. Fish was a sadomasochist, meaning that he craved feeling pain as well as inflicting it, and he did so for sexual gratification. Fish reportedly developed a tendency for sexual sadism throughout his formative years. He would often subject himself to painful procedures, most notably driving nails into his body, especially the area between his scrotum and his rectum. At first, he would drive them in and pull them out again, but eventually, he started driving them in so far that he couldn't get them back out. After he was arrested and examined by a doctor, an X-ray showed 29 needles stuck in his pelvis. Fish terrified his family with bizarre outbursts. In 1898, when he was 28, Fish wed 19-year-old Anna Mary Hoffman in a marriage his mother arranged. Hoffman had 6 children with Fish before she abandoned her family in 1917 to take up residence with a previous boarder. Although they never legally divorced, Fish subsequently wed 2 other women in short-lived unions. One of Fish's sons, Albert Fish Jr., recounted the story of an afternoon where his father ruined a family outing in upstate New York during his 1935 testimony. In 1922, Fish, who reportedly suffered from hallucinations, climbed the hills of Westchester, threw his fist into the sky, and continually screamed, "I am Christ." His erratic behavior then escalated to include a biblical fascination with sin and sacrifice. He mutilated a mentally disabled teen's genitalia. One of Fish's first known victims was Thomas Kedden, a mentally disabled 19-year-old man who rode the rails in Delaware for most of his life until he ran into Fish. In 1910, Fish was working in Wilmington when he met Kedden. Reportedly, Fish and Kedden had a sexual relationship that ended when Fish mutilated the teen's genitalia. In Albert Fish, in his own words, The Shocking Confessions of the Child-Killing Cannibal, author and filmmaker John Borowski presents Fish's recollections of the events. "I shall never forget his scream, or the look he gave me." Fish maintained that although he initially planned to kill Kedden, he tended to the wound before imparting the teen with a final kiss and farewell. "Took first train I could get back home, never heard what became of him, or tried to find out." Fish lured a little girl with the promise of a party, then killed and ate her. 10-year-old Gracie Budd is known as Fish's most publicized victim. In 1928, Fish inquired with the Budd parents about hiring their son Edward for some work. Initially, he planned to kill the 18-year-old. After an on-and-off friendship with the Budd family, Fish pretended to take little Gracie to a birthday party. He actually took the girl to the rundown Wisteria cottage. After he strangled her, he mutilated the body and reportedly ate the remains over 9 days. The police arrested another suspect in 1930 for the girl's death, and Fish wasn't apprehended for the crime until 1934. Fish wrote horrific letters to the parents of his victims. In 1934, Fish decided to write an anonymous letter to Gracie Budd's parents 6 years after she went missing. The bizarre letter initially details how Fish came to learn about cannibalism. Although investigators could not confirm the authenticity of Fish's tales, the latter part of the letter reveals Gracie's true killer. Fish included a linear timeline of the events that occurred on the day of Gracie's disappearance, including how he took her under false pretenses. He explains that she died a virgin, although he describes how he cooked and ate her remains for 9 days. Detectives were able to identify Fish as a suspect from the letters sent to the Budds. He also wrote to Lonely Hearts. Following his release from a psychiatric facility in 1930, police arrested Fish in 1931 for mailing obscene letters. Fish wrote to women who would request pen pals in the Lonely Hearts section of his local newspapers. Often, he would pretend to be a Hollywood producer named Robert Fisk with a son named Bobby who needed frequent spankings with a cat o' nine tails. Fish reportedly corresponded with one woman who went on with his game of perversion, and even admitting to being interested in cannibalism, he instructed her to tie up her son and husband so that they could both feast on them. When Fish sent an inappropriate letter to a maid, the woman notified the authorities. Fish was again briefly hospitalized. And with that, we've reached the end of this video, all about the real boogeyman, Albert Fish. If you enjoyed it and you found it helpful, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more content just like this.